And welcome to the Midday Show. I am Jeff Everett. He is Mark Messina. It is Feisty Thursday. We have some people that are singing on The Voice. We also have some new music coming out from some local musicians. Dylan Rockoff, Bean, if you remember him. He was American Idol, though, not The Voice, but we're going to dive into some of that. We still have the 5 Days Up Memorial story. Maybe we'll get into it today, deep dive into some of it. There's a story out about Ime Udoka. We didn't get to talk about it before the show. He is the Boston Celtics coach, very similar to the Weatherman story we talked about yesterday. Looks like he's going to be suspended for a year for something that happened within the organization. I'm not sure if I agree with it or not, so maybe we'll get to that today as well. Feisty Thursday. Mark, how are you feeling today?
Jeff tried to cancel the show twice before we went on.
Twice?
Jeff is just having an irrational morning. I can't really explain it. Before we get back into the other stuff, I don't know, Ime Udoka, he was just there a year?
The last year was his first year.
Because Stevens went upstairs.
Yeah. Now, he's not new. I mean, he was in the Spurs organization. He's been coaching in the NBA for 10 plus years, and he's been with successful organizations.
That's what I was going to ask you where he came from.
Yeah.
He came from San Antonio.
He was in San Antonio for the majority of it. Where he went between that and Boston, I'm not sure, but he is a Popovich disciple. Like, he was one of his right-hand mans, and that's essentially how he became a
And they did well.
He
made the finals. He did not have a bad year.
No. So he had a relationship. I mean, we can just dive right into it. He had a relationship with a staff member that was, no pun intended, that was below him. And essentially within the Boston, it was consensual. In the Boston Celtics organization, you are not supposed to have any sexual relationships with an employee. Like, it's in the handbook, contract, whatever it may be. It came out that he had those relationships. So obviously there's this whole power dynamic between your boss and your employee and all of those things. Right now, it looks like, according to Wojnarowski and Shams, which are like the two biggest guys in the industry, they are saying that it looks like he will be suspended for the full year. The assistant coach will be the interim head coach. I get he broke a rule, but to me, like, the consensualness, the idea of, again, like, I don't think he did anything illegal. I don't know. I mean, maybe.
And this is a Celtic. This isn't an NBA.
No, this is a Boston Celtics.
This is a Celtic rule.
Yep.
I think it's archaic. I'm with it. Like, do you know how many Office Place romances there are? And I'm not talking about scandalous affairs, whatever. Sure. Like, when people are single adult, you work with these people all the time. I understand if you're at a place where it was affecting, somebody was getting more money, somebody was getting promoted, somebody was getting, playing time, which obviously that doesn't come to pass in this situation, but something that it was affecting the product.
Right.
But if she's like in accounting, if she's in marketing, if she's just I mean, how many employees do you think the Celtics have? 200?
A lot. So they haven't said who the actual employee is. They just keep referring to her as a female staff member. The Boston Celtics will likely suspend coach. This is ESPN and CBS Sports have both essentially almost posted the same article. Boston Celtics will likely suspend coach Ime Udoka for the entirety of the season. Udoka allegedly had, quote, an improper, intimate, and consensual relationship, end quote, with a female staff member that violated the team's code of conduct. The assistant coach will likely be named the interim. Coaching suspensions are extremely rare in the NBA. This has only happened a handful of times, and never have they been longer than 2 games. So a years-long suspension would be setting a precedent that's never been set before. Again, the interesting thing that comes down to this, so far from all the reporting, there's not a legality issue. There's not an issue with the police. There's nothing like that. This is a staff ruling.
He broke an office policy.
Yes. And my understanding from what I read is that the policy is not so much to stop people from having relationships. It is to avoid the issue of somebody feeling like they must have a relationship with a person because they are higher up in the staff organization chart. So,
and I understand that, but in the this would be a time to have an HR specialist in there, because I get that, But, and maybe there's other people at her, assuming this female staff member is not the only person that does her job. If there's multiple people in the accounting department or multiple people in marketing or whatever, and the other people that are her equals feel like they don't get treated as well, or their job is somehow worse or harder than this girl because she's dating the head coach.
I see what you're saying.
I could see that. But I would think there has to be, now that I'm thinking at, there has to be more to this. It must have been causing a problem somewhere.
So
because if everybody, like if everyone else in the company's like, well, this isn't fair. So there must be people in the company right now that are applauding this because it was making people's lives worse.
It's possible. What makes the story even, I guess, juicier, for lack of a better word, because obviously we talked about the Adam Levine issue earlier this week. He is married to Nia Long, which, if you don't know who Nia Long is, she was in the Friday movie. She's in a bunch of different
who's married to Nia
rap
Long?
songs. Ime Udoka. That's his wife.
Oh, so this was an extramarital relationship.
Correct. Yes.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yes.
Okay.
But Nia Long, I believe, who else she was in? Wasn't the Cosby Show? There's something else that Nia Long was in. But so
Nia
there's
Peoples was on Fame, but that's different.
So Nia Long. So there's a little bit of like the whole Victoria's Secret model with Adam Levine. Like there's a little bit of that to this story as well that makes it kind of gossipy as well. Why can I not for the life of me think what she was in? She was in another old sitcom, and I'm just going to let it go because I cannot think. She was in Friday. She was in Are We There Yet with Ice Cube. She played Lisa Wilkes. What would that have been from? Can you think of it?
Nope.
Okay. I'll come back to Nia Long. So yeah, sorry feeling. We got into it before the show. We're not really into it, but we disagreed, and you are just you just want to see 16-year-old kids lose, and
no,
it's just a very different.
Is that what we're talking about now? I just think it's fascinating. I think it is.
Ah, there it is. Nia Long was in The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. Thank you.
Which one?
What do you know?
Was she the sister? Or
I'm guessing she had short hair.
Oh my gosh, what was this? Because was she Carlton's sister?
By the way, you could have cared less about this 30 seconds ago.
Well, now I can relate.
And now it's the most important thing that we've
I've
talked
seen
about.
Friday, but I can't picture but I've seen a couple or 100 episodes of The Fresh Prince.
She's absolutely beautiful, and I'm not implying that your wife should have to be beautiful for you to not cheat on her. But it is wild to me. I mean, people in rap songs and different things, people talk about like having crushes on Nia Long and like that. Like Nia Long, I'm trying to think how to explain this.
It just rhymes easily.
No. At my age, there are certain people, there are certain actresses, if you were a high school boy, that just like that first crush forever. It's kind of like the bedroom poster scenario. Like Nia Long is up there. Like Nia Long is held in high regard, probably for kids between the age of like 35 and 45 now, as being like a first crush, first watch. And so, and Ime Udoka like landed her, and like he was lucky enough to marry her. And I don't know, it's wild.
Well, I think, I mean, not to go off this rabbit hole, but the attractiveness of the people involved does not make the relationship any easier.
I'm not saying
and when people
I'm not saying
cheat,
that.
it has nothing to do. I mean, when you look at the people with, you know, Elizabeth Taylor was married 17 times, and Jennifer Aniston's been in and out of relationships and all that. So, like, the most beautiful people, and Christy Brinkley was married to Billy Joel, which no one understands, and that one didn't last. I
agree.
But it is.
Bogue wants to know if you play Catan. There's no way he plays Catan.
I don't know what Catan is.
I knew there's no way that you actually knew what Catan was. Anything else you want to talk about today before I go into The Voice?
No, because you brought it up before we got off.
No, we don't. That's fine.
I think the Southern Columbia is a huge football game with Danville tomorrow night. I think it is a fascinating. We're trying to figure out when the last time Southern Columbia lost more than one game in a season. We think it was 2011. We're not sure of that. Maybe somebody can look it up.
Okay.
They've won 5 straight state titles. I think it is. And there are lots of schools that would be thrilled to be 3-2. And there are lots of coaches that are very used to being, sometimes we're 5-0, sometimes we're 2-3, sometimes and this is just uncharted water for them. And it would be interesting to walk out of Danville Stadium tomorrow night with the Southern crowd if they're 3-2. I just, and you don't think you're like, oh, they'll be fine.
No.
And I don't think they'll burn the city down.
No.
But I think it is going to be fascinating.
Way more diplomatically than any of the previous conversation that
you're
which
trying
which is fine. It's fair. If you want to be diplomatic now on screen, that's very okay with me.
You think fans are crazy everywhere except in Southern Columbia they're rational. I don't think fans are rational anywhere.
I think most people have no idea what it's like to be a part of a team, a school, or a community that is as successful at one thing as Southern Columbia has been. And so
I totally agree with that.
And so,
but it doesn't make them more rational.
And so, because of that, I let you speak. And so, because of that, I think there's this idea that to have a loss, to have 2 losses, to have 3 losses, whatever it ends up being, I think there's this sense of like the community has no other purpose, that the community cannot see past the scoreboard. And I said to you, my argument to you was, I think in bigger places, I kind of could get what you're implying. If you're in Texas at this place as 100,000 people and they're able to separate themselves from the relationship of the kids on the field versus them as actual humans and students, I can see how people could like get feisty, like actually get upset about some of this stuff. I think Southern Columbia is too small. I think everybody knows somebody. I think everyone's a cousin of a cousin. I think everyone's, that's my nephew. That's my best friend's kid. Like, I just think they're going to be able to keep some of this in perspective that bigger communities and bigger places would struggle to do so. And so I think they've been so successful that it's not enough for them to lose. I think there's going to be people around the area that they almost want them to fester in it. They want it to like really irk them and burn them that like they've lost 2 in a row. So I'm not saying there won't be a disappointment. I'm not saying there won't be people, like you said, like they're going to start ratcheting. I agree with all of that stuff, but I don't think it's like as doomy or as gloomy as people outside of that community would think it is. That's all.
Well, the arguments that and you're saying because of the size of it, like one of the arguments I said is last year Clemson went 11-2.
It's Clemson.
They didn't win the ACC championship.
They don't know those kids personally.
I get it.
Okay.
But when you talk to Clemson football people, last year at 11-2 was a failure. Mm-hmm. When there's about 6 schools in the country that would think 11-2 is a failure, they were one of them. And I wonder, and I don't know this, I'm speculating. They've won 5 straight state championships. Mm-hmm. I think the football fans there's no way they can be level-headed after that. That their overwhelming success must have skewed their perspective. And 3-2 means the sky is falling.
We just disagree.
That's what I suspect.
Okay.
Maybe I'm wrong.
And we just disagree.
Now, I've heard there was another argument from one of the people here that they have, once upon a time, Southern Columbia was kind of like just football. They have gotten so good at so many other sports, mm-hmm. Including girls soccer, including girls basketball.
Sure.
They used to suck at boys basketball. Now they're competitive.
They're good. Yeah, they're good at
They're good at almost everything.
They should have beat us last year.
They're super at wrestling. Super mm-hmm. wrestling program. Yeah. So maybe they have become so good across the board that if the football team is human as opposed to superhuman, then it'll be just like
maybe I'm too optimistic about it. I just find it hard to believe that like state titles makes the entire community lose their perspective on losing. I just can't imagine that. I'm not saying they'll be happy about it. I'm not saying there won't even be like grumblings or people complaining, but the idea that like it's going to be all that matters and not like people, the average person deals with loss all the time, whether it's losing at cards, it's losing a family member, it's something not going your way. everybody has challenges every day in their life. And the idea that a couple of state titles makes everyone lose their perspective of that in a community that small,
5 in a row? 6 out of 7?
See, we just disagree. We completely disagree on the perspective of losing and how tight-knit and smaller communities handle those things together. And so I can't imagine the same way a community rallies around somebody when they lose a loved one or whatever it may be, something doesn't go the way, you lose your job, whatever it is. The idea that state titles makes people lose that perspective for 17-year-old kids when they lose a football game, I just can't, no. Like, I'm just not buying it. I don't believe that.
See, and this is the thing.
I just don't.
Because everyone has a perspective of losing, except Southern Columbia football.
I disagree.
Because they never lose.
But they have lost before in the past.
A long time ago. Not
but,
when these kids were alive.
But you're only looking at it from that. Okay, here's the example I'm making to you. Are you telling me that everybody in that community, because they've never lost a football game, they have no perspective on losing anything else in life?
Well, sure, but not this.
Okay, but that's what I'm saying. You don't think they're going to be able to transcend that over? Like, you don't think they're going to be able to cross over other examples in their life of losing things to football?
I don't think fans
really
do that.
They're just incapable of doing so. Like, that's what I'm getting.
I think UConn women's basketball. I think UConn's women's basketball fans can't. They're not supposed to lose.
It's not a fair example because no one has an actual relationship with Diana Taurasi.
But
like, no one actually goes and no one goes down to the mini mart. No one goes down to the mini mart and runs into Gino. Like, that's not how it works.
Let me ask you this: how many Southern Columbia? When Southern Columbia fans walk into the stadium,
these are my notes, by the way. I'm just tossing them off to the side because it doesn't.
I have one more question, then we'll go. When Southern Columbia fans walk into the Danville Stadium tomorrow night, do you think that they walk in thinking there's a 50-50 chance we're going to lose?
I think they walk in knowing that this probably isn't a group like the groups they've had in the past. And given what just happened in the Danville and Loyalsock game, yes, that there's a chance they're going to lose to Danville.
50-50. Like it's a coin flip game.
I mean,
because on paper it seems like a coin flip.
I'm not a high school football expert, but it does seem as if Danville has a very good chance to win this football game on Friday.
I would, and I agree with you.
Okay.
I think it's a coin flip. I think Southern Columbia fans show up thinking they're going to win because they have been taught that when we show up at the game and we watch our team win. And it is and if they lose again, I think they're going to walk out and they are going to be shocked.
Your ability to attach all of this stuff in Southern Columbia is being like taught, like, but every other, like, if anyone else do you know how many teams show up to Southern Columbia and are like, yeah, we got a chance. I think we're going to win. Everyone thinks they're going to. No, everyone thinks they're going to win.
Well, I don't think they do.
Across the state of Pennsylvania, the majority of fans that walk in, unless your team's 0-4 right now and hasn't scored a point, the majority of fans walk into that game going to themselves like, there's a chance we could win. Like, that's the whole point.
Well,
but
that's a fascinating dynamic.
For some reason, you have attached to Southern Columbia this idea that it's what they've been taught and it's what they know and they don't know anything else. And I just disagree because that's the whole point of high school sports. That's why high school sports is great, because it teaches you how to handle things outside of sports. But for some reason, does it not? Is that not the whole selling point on high school sports?
Well, that's the selling point, but I don't know if it's true.
Learning how to lose, learning how to work together. Okay, but here's the funny part. Anytime you try to apply stuff from the outside into high school sports, it's like, no, you can't do that. It doesn't work. And what I'm saying to you is, like, the people in Southern Columbia are just like you and I. There's no difference. They go through their own internal struggles, external struggles. There's things that didn't go their way. There's losses that they have had. The idea that they're not going to be able to apply that to high school football is ludicrous.
But it doesn't happen there. It happens in life.
It doesn't happen there.
It happens in life, but it doesn't happen on their football field. They win all the time. I think you made a very interesting point. It would be fascinating. Do I think people show up and think like, oh yeah, we could be the ones that beat Southern? Sure. But do I think there are lots and lots of fans that for the last 5 years have showed up when our team plays Southern and they're like, we're going to get crushed. We're going to be out of here early. Yes.
Sure.
I think it's happened to both sides. I think Southern's trained on winning and people who play Southern are trained on losing. And we're going to Southern and we're going to lose. Or Southern's coming to us and we're going to lose.
Okay.
And I think people get that.
Okay.
So I don't think there's this I don't think 50% of the people walked in and thought we're going to upset Southern Columbia. I think they walked in thinking we're going to get out of here early tonight because it's going to be a mercy rule.
But that's possible. But none of what you just said explains anything about the perspective of Southern Columbia, or like a small community like Southern Columbia, and how they handle losing. None of it.
The football program has very, very little practice at how they handle losing. losing.
Okay.
So you go from sport to sport.
Okay.
Like the loyal sock community handling losing in basketball and losing in wrestling is night and day. It's same people, it's same school, it's same hallways, because the basketball program always wins and the wrestling program has been down lately.
But there's a difference between disappointment versus like okay, because you haven't technically said this yet. What you're implying here is that you think people are going to like be livid. Like you think people are going to turn on the kids. Yes, you did. Yes, you did.
No,
that was
no.
the conversation we had.
Livid.
And now we're gonna turn the thing.
But they're going.
Who do you think they're going to blame? If they lose to Danville, who will they blame?
It depends who is. Who are the community people?
Sure.
They're going to blame the kids.
Okay, who are the kids going to blame?
The coaches.
Who are the coaches going to blame?
The kids.
Okay, and
so
who are
the parents are going to blame the coaches.
Okay, and because of this, you think like it's not going to
because that's what happens everywhere.
Okay, but it's not what happens everywhere. It happens in occasions, but they're like again, there's a weight at Southern Columbia that I think you do understand, and it's the whole point of your argument is like when you've never lost before, how do you handle losing?
Yes.
Okay, but you're so one-track minded with it because you're not willing to apply that people don't apply other things to high school sports. Like whatever the scoreboard reflects is how they must feel, and how they handle it is going to be only what they've ever done on a football field. What they've done off of a football field or what people go through every day in their lives, they can't possibly attach those emotions to a high school football team. And I disagree. I think if little Johnny loses on Friday and Uncle Kurt comes down from the stands, it's still little Johnny. The scoreboard isn't going to be reflective of what he thinks about little Johnny or the effort he gave on the field.
He's not going to cut him off the Christmas list.
All right.
Okay, well, let's look at it this way. Life goes back to expectations. So if you are a state champion wrestler and you, as a junior, you went undefeated or you lost once, but the kid that you lost to graduated and you just, every time you walk out on the mat, you kick somebody's ass.
Okay.
But in football.
Wrestling was a bad example.
But in football, your team's okay.
Yes.
And you're a 500 team. You're a 6-4. You're something like that.
Yes.
I think the kid, because of his expectations, he can handle losing in football better than he can handle it in wrestling. And if you are a state champion as a junior and you lose in regionals as a senior, you don't say, well, I'll apply all the stuff I lost in losing in football, because your expectations are different.
But it helps you deal with it. You can't tell me he's not better prepared to deal with it.
He would be to a degree. Yes. He realizes the sun still comes up tomorrow. Yes. He realizes my girlfriend still wants to date me and my parents still love me. Although depending on in wrestling families, maybe if you lose the state title, your parents don't love you anymore. I don't know. But
this is what I think is happening. I'm not saying people have to like Southern Columbia football. If you are somebody not from Southern Columbia and you dislike them, who am I to say that you shouldn't or that you have to cheer for them? However, I think because of their success and because there's an overwhelming amount of people who do not like Southern Columbia football, I think them losing and the possibility of them losing a second or third or a district title this year, because the door has cracked open, it's almost like it's not enough for them to lose. It's really important for people that they believe that it's really irking them. So losing is no longer enough for Southern Columbia for people on the outside. They have to I bet you they're steaming mad. I bet you they don't even know how to handle this because it's been so long since they've lost.
That's my bet. Yes, I'll bet they don't know how to handle it because it's been so long.
And what I'm telling you is I think people handle losing in different ways.
Correct.
Okay. And I think they will handle this way better than what people A, want them to, and B, that they hope they do. Because they're so successful and there's all these people, they cheat, they recruit, they do this, they do that, whatever. I don't really care one way or the other about Southern Columbia football. What I'm here to say is the people who really want them to lose, it's gone a step further. It's no longer good enough for them to lose. I hope I bet you it just burns them. I bet you they don't even know how to deal with this. That's what's happening here. without a doubt.
No, I disagree.
Yes,
I think it's just the same.
So
Let me give you another real world.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're some theater person, and every show you audition for, you get the lead.
Mm-hmm.
Then you finally audition for a show and you don't get the lead.
Yes.
Do you think they're like, oh, okay, I'm good with this? Because every other show I've been in, there have been people who've been under me. There have been people that have been under me.
Yes.
I think the person who's auditioned for 8 straight shows and got 8 straight leads is crestfallen when they don't get a lead.
You've given great analogies. Every analogy you've given me so far, you have been very black and white about it. That, yes, they're upset, and there's no way they're not upset. But there's also a gray area of how they handle that. And the point that I'm making is everyone right now, including you, is like, boy, I bet they can't even handle it. And what I'm saying
they're going to show up to school on Monday. I don't think they're not. I don't think the sun is going to burn down.
The sun is going to rise in Elisburg, whether people want it to or not. And that is the point, is people are trying to make it bigger than what it is, deeper than what it is, and they're trying to act as if the sun isn't going to come up. So it's going further.
Yes. Now you're being overdramatic.
I'm not. So the point I'm making is it goes further than every analogy you've given me. Yes, I agree that they would be upset. Totally, 100%. I'm going a step further and saying, of course they're going to be upset, but the way they're going to handle it, they're still going to go in a try the next play.
Of course
they
are.
Okay, and it's the same thing with Southern Columbia.
But
they're going to go into film. They're going to try to figure it out. They'll play the next game. They're going to compete for a district title, and if they win that, they're a small enough school in 2A that they'll have a chance to win a state title still. And like the sun is not crashing down.
Don't you think the conversations in the grocery store on Saturday are going to be different for the first time in a dozen years if Southern Columbia is 3-2?
They will be different in the sense of it won't be congratulations. But when the person walks in the grocery store and they go, hey, how's so-and-so leg? He got cracked down on that second down in the first quarter. I think those conversations are exactly the same. There's no difference. It's too small of a community for it not to be.
No, because the losses are way more harder to take than the wins.
Dude.
I think when they're 5-0, they walk in the grocery store and they're like, "Hey, what's up?" Because we're supposed to be 5-0, just like the sun's supposed to come up.
I don't know, dude. You still got to go pick up milk Sunday morning. You're still going. Like the people that go to church Sunday. The people who shop on Saturday. The people who have jobs on Monday morning wake up and go to their jobs.
You don't think
how different can Elisburg honestly be those next 3 days after if they lose on Friday? Honestly, how different could it be?
Well, it's not like that. I think the conversations of the fans are. You don't think the conversations of Notre Dame fans was different after they lost at home to Marshall? Of course it was.
Yes, but a lot of those conversations are like, how do we figure this out? Like, what do you think he needs to do? Like, they're like,
you know what the conversations are? We suck. We have one good player. We suck. That's what the conversation is.
Okay. Are they still Notre Dame fans?
Yes.
Okay. So what's your point?
The point is, it is going to be fascinating to see because, as you said, this is my whole point, that we all deal with loss. And we all have dealt with it in aspects of life. You know who doesn't deal with loss? Southern Columbia football. And it's going to be fascinating to see how they handle it.
And so my one-line response to that would be, you're only viewing these kids, coaches, and community members in one facet. And they are bigger than that one facet. It might be the thing they enjoy the most. It might be the thing they're most proud of. It might be the thing they devote the most time to. But there are so many other facets going on in their lives than just the scoreboard on Friday night. It matters. It means a lot to them. But the idea that like there's just this like, I don't want to use the word irk again, but this idea that it is unrecoverable, this idea that it has to burn them because they have no idea how to handle this. I just disagree. I can't imagine that that's the case, that they're not going to be able to apply all the other things in their life, that is your nephew, that is your son, that is your grandson, that is your best friend's kid, that so-and-so is everyone all right. Like I saw so-and-so got carried off the side. Like all of those things are not going to change. None of it, regardless of what the scoreboard shows.
Correct.
Okay.
Let me ask one more question, then we can move on. Do you think dealing with loss, and again, it's because they've set the bar so high and they've had so much success that they've made this difficult for themselves. Do you think that it won't be harder for Southern Columbia football to deal with loss on a Saturday morning than every other football program, not only in our region, but
you and I've actually talked about this on other shows. I think when you're a really good program, there's an understanding of what our goal is, what our mission is. There's a function to it. And that function doesn't change very much regardless of the result, because that you understand the process and the mission is more so than worrying about what anyone else is doing or the score. And so I find it hard to believe, in my experience of like being around good programs, and I've been around bad programs, I find it hard to believe that at Southern Columbia football, there is not a concept of, regardless of what that scoreboard shows on Friday, on Saturday morning I have this, and on Saturday I have stretching, and on Sunday I have film, and on Sunday night I have weightlifting, and on Monday I go back to practice. The idea that there is not a function and a process to keep them moving forward regardless of the scoreboard, I just find that impossible to believe.
Well, and I get that, but the part that you're dismissing is it's not regardless of the scoreboard, because for the last however many years, the scoreboard has said the same thing all the time. They are dealing with loss, and they never deal with loss.
So they're dealing with loss. So you're implying that everything that is made, that they're just going to scrap that process? Like they're just
not at all.
Yes.
I'm
so
just
the
talking
process,
about the mood of the area. I'm not talking about the.
You're talking chicken and the egg stuff. So what I'm saying, So what I'm saying to you is, most people would say they're able to do that process because they always win. And I would say they always win because of that process. So it just depends on how you look at it. To me, I think it's about process. You want to win. Obviously, your mood might ebb and flow with what the scoreboard is. But if you believe in your process and you believe that these are the things that will make us successful eventually, like we will tap out at our capabilities if we follow this process. I can't imagine that Southern Columbia football, after all their success, does not have a process and does not believe that that process leads to winning. I just can't imagine that it's not that flow.
And I agree with that.
Okay.
But the point I'm making is their process has been so successful that they win every week.
Okay.
Week after week after week after week, year after year after year, they've won 5 straight state titles.
But there was a time when they didn't.
But that was
and they didn't. Okay, when they lost to Montoursville,
so long ago, these kids don't know that. These kids weren't part of that.
I disagree. They were probably in little jerseys on the sideline. They probably have siblings.
Different.
They have siblings and cousins that were a part of the program. And like the idea that these kids don't understand, that's absurd.
They've won 6 out of 7 state titles.
I understand. But when
they were in
lost,
elementary school.
Mark, what you're implying then is that when they lost in 2015, 2016, when they lost in 2016, 2015, is that they just scrapped their process and started over because now the process doesn't work anymore.
No.
Okay.
No. You're talking
so
about
they're
the
still going
process.
to do the same thing.
You're talking about the program and the process. I'm talking about the mood of the community. We're talking about different things.
I don't think we are. You asked me the question. You asked me, what do I think? How are they going to respond after a loss? Okay. And what I'm saying to you is, I don't think for the team, I think nothing changes. When they lost to Loyalsock, you're telling me that they're weakened, like their whole process and what they do as a program changed because they lost to Loyalsock?
Well, no, I think they show. I think when they watch film and when they go to the weight room and when they show up for practice, I think the schedule changes. You don't think confidence changes? You don't think atmosphere changes?
But isn't that part of coaching? Isn't that part of like your job as a coach?
But yes,
let me put it to you this way: if they've lost confidence, then it's your job as a coach to say to them, like, hey, everything that we wanted to accomplish is right in front of us. We can still win conference. We can still win district. We can still win states. Like, our goals and our mission, our process haven't changed, and because of that, neither should your confidence. If you're not doing that, then I can't help.
And you can say that as a coach, but it doesn't necessarily work. Because if one of their goals was undefeated season, so let me just ask you this:
well, wait,
you don't think after Loyalsock beat them, you don't think Loyalsock's atmosphere was different in their locker room?
How'd that work out for them? They went and lost to Danville the next week.
Danville's really good.
Okay, so
they played a great game. They lost by 3.
So here's what I'm saying: super team. You think so? Again, Van Fleet they beat Southern Columbia, then they lose to Danville again. What I'm saying to you is, in that ebb of flow, what I would hope that the Loyalsock program is doing is their process. Like, if you're going to be a successful program, you have to follow your process. You're getting too much into like the confidence, everything else.
No, I'm not. That's what I'm talking about. That's what I'm talking about.
And what I'm saying to you is, the way you stabilize that stuff is so that everyone is on the same page. And the way you're on the same page is everyone understands the process and the mission. So again, it's chicken and the egg. Like, you're trying to say, like, well, their confidence probably shifted. That's why you have a process. That's why you have a mission. Like, that is why you have those things. And every team's different. For some teams, the process and the mission is, how do we get better every single day? Because we're not good enough yet. we're too young, right? We're not big enough. We don't have this. We don't have that.
Right.
So your process of admission changes depending on the team. The idea that Southern Columbia doesn't have something in place to handle a loss to a really good football team is ludicrous to me. Like the idea that now they're just floating into the mist, so they have no idea what their purpose is anymore is nuts.
But they haven't had to deal with it, and they lost to someone last year. Why miss? They lost to somebody super good.
Yes,
but it was a school way bigger than them. They still won the state title. They don't. You just make it sound like that they don't. Okay. Like obviously all through my brother's baseball career, he just won. And that's why I ended up in the big leagues. That's why I ended up in the Hall of Fame. But there was a point in 1993 when he was hurt. I mean, even his first year in the big leagues, he went 18-5 and was fourth in the Cy Young, and just everywhere Mike went, he always won. But then like the first time that he really struggled, you could tell that it affected him.
Yes. And what did he do?
But
you've told me these stories before. He went back to his regiment. But he fell back onto his laurels.
But
he went back to his process.
But there's a difference when you stand on the mound and you're like, I get everybody out all the time. I'm on a roll. It's easier than you're like, I'm just not there. You see it with golfers all the time.
Yeah.
You see it with golfers who've lost. They're in the top 10 one week, and then for a month they can't make the cut.
They're also individual sports where you have to dig your own way out. And as a team, it's much easier to look at each other and say, let's do this together. So I understand. I think it's a fair comparison, but I still think like you've told me stories about your brother before, like when he's working out and it's like, oh, you should work on it. He's like, okay. But like, he knows what he's working on. Like he knows this is what got me there. This is what we're going to do because this is what makes us successful.
But you could see there were times that he was visibly affected because he was struggling.
But that's part of sports.
I get it. But guess who never struggles? Southern Columbia football.
I disagree.
And that's what I'm saying.
When you say never, there's this idea that like they haven't lost since 1987. And like there's like they have lost before in the past and they will lose again. But what makes them successful is like their commitment to process and mission. I'm telling you, they might have different wording or language for it, but any program that is consistently successful, that is the reason why. It's because kids fluctuate. Talent goes in and out the door. You're different. Maybe what you run is different, all those things. But your actual philosophy and belief system does not change because those are the things you lean back on when you lose to a Loyal Sock or maybe you lose to a Danville.
I get it.
I don't think you do.
People who you're just saying that everyone's used to losing and they could all bounce back.
I'm not saying that. I'm actually not saying that at all. What I'm saying to you is that highly successful people can't handle losing because they never lose. They can handle losing because they have something that other people probably don't have, which is a belief system and a process that they can lean on. Well, and that's the part of this that you are not factoring in.
Highly successful people. Usually, the difference between highly successful people and everyone else is highly successful people were not afraid to fail. And most millionaires have had businesses that have failed.
Correct.
And those are all the statistics of it because they've been through it. And what I'm saying is these kids, this community of late in football, they've never had to deal with it.
They have dealt with it. They dealt with it.
They dealt with it.
They dealt with it 6 years ago. They dealt with it before that, and they will deal with it again. But again, when you have strong enough,
that's a simple blanket statement when they've won 5 straight championships in a row. Is there anyone else in the state in any sport that can say this? Is there anyone else? How many teams in the country can say this?
Mark,
we've won 5 straight state championships.
2, 3, 4 years from now, will Southern Columbia have won a district title? Yes or no? Just yes or no.
Sure.
You've asked me like 7 questions and I've answered all of it. Okay.
Absolutely.
In 2, 3, 4 years from now, will they compete for a state title? Not saying they'll win it because it's really hard to do it, but will they compete for a state title?
I think they'll win them.
So here's what I'm saying to you. 2, 3, 4 years from now, the idea that people thought that this was this big of a deal that they lost 2 games in a regular season is absurd. It's crazy. You know why?
But in the moment, on Saturday morning, they're not going to say, well, a few years from now, we'll be really good from now. On Saturday morning, they're going to be talking about Friday night.
Obviously, they are trying to win every week. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that.
No, but the atmosphere, the atmosphere in the here and now in the locker room has nothing to do with 3 years ago, and it has nothing to do with 3 years from now. It is the moment and the expectations. And this is what it comes down to, because this in life, it all depends on expectations. Or not all of it. So much of life depends on your expectations. If they walked into the season and they were like, we might be a little down this year. We might be, we're just going to go in and battle, and we're going to do our thing. And, it's not going to come as easy. We don't have any of the Garcia. We don't have Fleming. We don't have, it's going to be harder this year. Then they might be braced for it.
Sure.
But if they just showed up thinking, this is what we do, we just win state championships.
Okay.
Then it's
okay. So I'm trying to think how I want to say this, because this is going to be the most, I'm going to sound super conceited. There are few things in life that you could walk in here and try to talk about where I would be like, I clearly know this more than you. You trying to tell me how Southern Columbia feels right now, to me, feels like if I came in here and tried to tell you how real estate works, or if I came in here and tried to tell you how baseball history works, or
I'm certainly speculating, but I've been around sports enough to speculate.
I am not comparing Loyal Sock basketball to Southern Columbia football. I don't think it's a fair comparison. However, we went almost 3 years without really losing a basketball game. We lost one basketball game in almost a 3.5-year span. I think what people don't...
that can't be right.
It is, because of the COVID stuff and the way it all worked out.
So in the year that COVID showed up, in 20,
yes,
you just won a state playoff game and it got scrapped.
Correct.
Okay, then the next year you came back.
Yes, we only lost one game the whole year.
And you lost one game that year.
Yeah.
Okay, so in a 2-year... So the year that you hold on, I'm just going through this.
Mark, but you're watering down the point I'm trying to make.
Were you undefeated were you undefeated in the COVID year?
The COVID year, we didn't. I think we lost in the conference championship, but that's not it's a conference game. It's not like a regular season or a district or a state game. Not everybody plays those two games.
You lost the PHAC.
Yes, but not everybody plays those two games.
You were something and one that year? Oh, that was the year I kept telling you
that we were the worst undefeated
16-0 team in the state.
We were really good. But to be undefeated was kind of absurd in the moment. Anyway, now that you've completely watered down and taken away from the point, I'm trying to figure
out what you're saying. Okay,
we went 3 years without almost 3.5 years with almost losing a game. That's how little we lost.
Okay.
So the point that I'm making to you is, in that span, when we did lose, it's not like you're upset, you're disappointed, but this idea that the sky is falling is so false from the narrative that I think most of those teams feel. It's just not a real thing.
But your level is different.
Because when you're so hyper focused and people are so bought in to what you are trying to accomplish, it's like a blip. It's like a speed bump. It's like you don't even feel it underneath you. By the next morning, you're already thinking about the next game, the solutions, how you so this idea that a program like Southern Columbia doesn't know how to handle it, I find absurd. I find it insane.
But they never have to handle it. Why do you think it's absurd?
I just explained it to you.
It'd be like a millionaire going and his credit card gets turned down.
It's not.
He's never had this happen before.
No, because the comparison is when Loyal Sock beats Southern Columbia football, it is the big it's the thing. In the last 10 years, and granted, I know Loyal Sock has won a district title in football, but people would probably argue that it is the biggest accomplishment of the last 10 years in Loyal Sock football.
Mm-hmm.
And what I'm saying to you is the way everyone else feels about that win, it is a blimp on the radar of Southern Columbia football. And you can only understand that.
I disagree.
And but this is why you disagree, because you can only understand that when you're on the other side of it.
But you
can only understand it when you've been in the other locker room, when you've been in the other group. If you've never been in the other group or the other locker room, you can't possibly understand that, because to everybody else, it was the story. Oh my God, Southern Columbia football lost. Oh my God, Loyal Sock basketball lost. But when you're on the other side of it, you're so ingrained in what you're trying to do. It's a blip. It's like it's not there. And it's hard to explain to people.
But
that's why you and I are struggling with this. You
But here's
won't
the
understand it, and I get it.
Here's the aspect. Loyal Sock basketball is not Southern Columbia.
I agree. Which, by the way, for anybody who just tuned in, I made that argument to start the show.
Your expectations every year are to lose. Sooner or later, you're going to lose.
I mean, the expectation is strong, but go ahead.
You never went into a season thinking the state title is ours to win. If we lose, we disappoint.
In the last 6 years, I have gone into every season thinking the state title was something we could win.
And there's a difference between saying we can compete for it.
I agree, but I just wanted to clarify.
It's ours to win.
You're trying to make it seem as if we went into every season and thought like, yeah, we're going to lose eventually.
Sooner or later, we're going to lose.
But I can tell you that was not our attitude. Our attitude was if we do the right things, the state title could be ours. And that's a very different attitude than what you're expressing.
Okay, I guess. But the difference is you guys are used to losing because the COVID year, who knows how it would have turned out. And I don't even know how. You just kept telling me we're the worst undefeated team. But
yes.
But the next year you're obviously really good and you want a state title. But Southern doesn't go into it thinking we can compete. We might compete. We go into this. They win title after title after title after title. And now.
But they just lost 2 years ago?
No, they've won 5 in a row.
No. We're just talking about
they lost a game last year to somebody super who was like 5A.
Correct. Because yes, they upped their schedule. They
went to South Carolina a couple years ago to play, to find competition.
And they won that one. What I'm saying though is every team is different. Every journey is different. However, I think there's a collective few people that will truly ever understand that feeling of I don't want to say invincibility, but that feeling where your process and your missions are so aligned and there's such an understanding and there's such a buy-in to that what people think is a big deal, you don't even, it's it happens and it's well, hey, this is what we should try this now. And you're so ingrained, it doesn't matter. And that's the part that people will never understand, regardless of what happens to Southern Columbia football this season. You and other people will never be able to understand that. You won't.
Because and I don't disagree with that.
Right.
And that's why from the outside, but this isn't just about Southern Columbia football. They're just the best example here because they're the most successful thing that we can talk about. But when you take anyone, when you take rock bands, when you take, when Garth Brooks finally put out an album that flopped, it had to affect his confidence. When Tom Cruise or Denzel does a movie that flops, or God forbid, they read for a part and they want a part and they don't get it. When these people who are the most successful in the world, and Southern Columbia is one of the most successful football teams in the country. Mm-hmm. And when you're at this level that only a few people are at, mm-hmm. and then you all of a sudden deal with what is classified to you as failure, and however many albums Garth Brooks sold with when he did the whatever, it's still way more than there's a billion artists that would take it.
This is what I'm saying to you. I would be curious to hear your definition or another school's definition or another coach or player's definition of failure to that of a Southern Columbia football player or a Loyal Sock basketball player's definition of failure. Because the funny thing, failure.
That's a very good
because point. Failure in Loyal Sock is not losing a game. Failure at Loyal Sock is losing the district championship. Failure at Southern Columbia isn't losing a game. It's losing the state title or district title.
You don't know that.
But
that's speculation. But I get your point. It might be. You don't know what failure is in Southern Columbia.
My favorite part of this conversation is until you agree that I would know way more about this topic than you, we're gonna struggle because I just let you stipulate things for 45 minutes, and then the one time you think I stipulated something, you jumped on me like Johnny Cochran, that's a stipulation.
I don't think you know the tone of Southern Columbia football any more than I do. I'm not going to give you that.
I completely disagree. I think that I have been way closer to their situation than anything you would have been. I mean, I could be wrong. I might be. Jerk by saying that.
No. Loyal Sock basketball is as successful as in local basketball, Loyal Sox successful is as good as anything. The only one I can consider possibly is Mount Carmel girls. I just don't know how long.
I would argue Mount Carmel girls is probably a step above us.
Okay.
I would argue if we were going through. I mean, I'm sure we're forgetting some like track and field stuff and different. But I mean,
I'm just talking basketball.
I would imagine like Southern Columbia football, Mount Carmel girls basketball, Loyal Sox boys basketball, and I'm sure I have no doubt there's sports I am forgetting. But those are the one I would argue they're a step above us as far as like what they're achieving and the consistency that they're doing it at.
I mean, I think a comparison would be Penn State wrestling. If Penn State wrestling takes 9th at nationals this year, it's a terrible year. Now, for all 100 other schools, a top 10 finish at nationals is a fantastic year.
But I just don't
Penn
think
State's winning national titles year after
but
year
we're not
after
talking,
year.
I agree.
They've set their bar so high.
But we're not talking about Southern Columbia losing states or districts. We're talking about them losing a regular season football game in conference. And so what I would say to you is that Penn State wrestling, if they went and they matched up with like Iowa and they lost one regular season match, I don't know how much would change because again, it's about process and it's about the vision and what is actually failure and what is actually success. I think for Penn State, failure is not losing a regular season game. Regular season match. Failure would be finishing 9th in nationals.
Right.
And so again, like while everyone else right now is running around with chickens like their heads cut off, like Southern Columbia lost. I'm just saying when you are on the other side of it, like it is a speed bump on the road to where you are trying to go. That's what I am saying.
This is my 1 sentence summarization. And we're using Southern Columbia at this because they are the best of the best in our area.
Without a doubt.
There are lots of just because someone has reached the pinnacle doesn't mean they can deal with adversity.
Mm-hmm.
And there are some that shake it off and keep going, and there are some that don't.
Mm-hmm.
And it would be interesting to not. And again, this all goes back to the mood of the town, because when you sit in the bleachers at games, it's fascinating to hear what people know and don't know and think and don't think.
Mm-hmm.
To me, it is a fascinating psychological study of what is going on there. Because here's the other reality. They could lose to Danville. They could lose to Mount Carmel. They have another good game against somebody. They have some tough games coming up. They could literally end up 6-4 in the regular season and then go on and win the state title.
Yes.
And then the question of that is, how does the community see them? How do the people in the Saturday morning barbershop and around the water cooler? Are they still a great team, or are they a lucky team? This is the whole, because they have set the bar so high for themselves. It's a fascinating dichotomy because nobody else are we talking about. Well, they're 3-1. They have another game tonight. They might win. They might lose. But for them, like when we announced that Southern Columbia was losing to Loyal Sox, the whole crowd oohed.
I know.
You don't get that from anybody else.
Correct.
Nobody else.
Yes. Listen, your outside perspective, there's very little, like 90% of your outside perspective, I agree with.
My whole perspective is outside. I'm not
That's
there.
what I'm saying. So I get
fascinated.
So I am saying to you that I agree. I'm literally trying to let you know I agree with 90% of what you're saying, and you won't even let me do that. I literally agree with 90% of what you are saying. The part that I think people forget is that I think for most high school teams in the state of Pennsylvania, there is an idea that every week fluctuates because they don't necessarily know how this could end. Like when you're a 500 football team or you're a team that doesn't have a long-standing tradition, like every week is kind of like life or death and up and downs and stuff like that. There are a few teams across the state that fall into these pockets of windows of time where they have these 3-year, 5-year, 8-year runs. 30. Well, I don't know. I'd have to go back through to see if Southern goes all the way back to like the 80s. There is that select group of people. There are times where they don't even flinch at things that other communities and programs, it would be like the sky is falling. That's all I'm saying.
And I think because of their success, when Loyal Sox lost to Danville, the community didn't flinch. When Montoursville loses to Danville in a couple weeks, the community's not going to flinch. When Lewisburg, all these other communities, when they lose to Danville, they're not going to flinch because I think if Southern Columbia loses to Danville tomorrow night, there'll be a big flinch, bigger than all the other ones. Even though people know, well, we lost to Loyal Side,
We
Loyal
just
Side lost to Danville.
I think people on the outside flinch. I don't think people on the inside do.
Maybe
You are letting your view, like you said, you were at a football game and everybody cheered. You go downtown and you talk to people and like, can you believe it happened? No, I can't. You're letting everything around you basically impose how you think Southern Columbia should be feeling. And what I'm trying to say is I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to impose the way everyone thinks Southern Columbia should be feeling. Because again, I'm not saying Loyal Side basketball is a comparison to Southern Columbia football, but what I am saying is that I have been in a situation close to it. And what I'm telling you is when you lose a game, it sucks. You don't want it to happen. Kids take it hard. But what I'm also saying to you is it's a lot easier the next day to bounce back because those programs understand what their mission is and what they're trying to do. And they understand that the sun has not set on them.
Don't you think there's more pressure in the bounce back?
No.
You don't think?
In the bounce back?
No,
great programs are excited to go get. That's the best part. We say all the time about basketball. The best part about basketball is you lose on Tuesday, you play on Thursday.
Well, and football ain't like that.
I understand.
I guess here's another.
So you're telling me when Southern Columbia went to go play again that they weren't like the most excited they'd been all season.
I think there's more pressure on the Danville game than there would have been if they were 4.
I would argue because Loyal Sock and Danville just played, it actually took pressure off of it. Because that score now reflects, and now they're going to be able to say, like, hey, this is a competitive game. Like, we got to show up. And if they do lose, they go, hey, like, that was a competitive game. Like, we showed up and it didn't go our way. Like, I think it actually gives them room to breathe.
Is it acceptable in Southern Columbia to say, well, we're kind of equal with Danville?
I don't think it's
Is that acceptable?
The question isn't if it's acceptable, though.
Well, that's my question. I'm asking the question.
No, you just keep changing the question until
there's lots of interesting the whole fascinating. I guess is another way to put it that the world can relate to. Like everyone gets dumped in life, except you, who always did the dumping.
I don't know about that.
So some people, like when they get dumped, they are devastated, and their world is affected for a long. Some people don't ever get over it, really. Sure. And some people just bounce back and you say, well, we've all been dumped. We've all been there.
Yes.
And we've all been there, but some people handle it way better than others.
I don't disagree with that.
And if it's the first time you've ever had your heart broken and been dumped, it is way harder to deal with it than if it's happened before.
Agreed.
And this is the first time they've ever had their heart broken for these kids.
I disagree.
Okay. Then I guess that's where we agree and disagree.
No, trust me, there were deeper places we disagreed. This is what I would say. I think for a lot of parents and fans, when's the only time you actually get to see them play football?
Like Friday night.
Friday night. That's the only time you actually get to see them do anything, right? So
that was like one of those obvious questions on the test that you're like, it's so obvious, that can't be the answer.
So one of the hardest things to explain to parents or fans or anything else, and they'll be like, boy, so-and-so can't shoot, or boy, like so-and-so looks raw, or he's not. What they don't understand is like most of your drills are competitive. Most of the things you're doing in practice, there's a winner and a loser. Like there are kids on Southern Columbia's football team that are starters that probably get their ass kicked every single day in practice in competitive drills. Like those kids are losing in competitive drills every single day. There's an offensive lineman who gets their ass kicked by a defensive end. There's a defensive lineman who hasn't touched the quarterback all year because he's playing against a really good offensive lineman.
I get your point.
Like there's a wide receiver who sucks every day in practice against the best corner because he can't get open. But then he goes and plays Lewisburg and the guy has 2 touchdowns.
I get it.
Okay. So again, it's the narrow viewpoint of what happens on that scoreboard Friday night defines them as a loser. And all I'm saying is, as a coach, as a player, as a parent, as a person, there are things beyond that scoreboard every single day where you have to handle adversity and losing. Some bigger, some smaller. The idea that these kids in this program never deals with losing is not true.
But don't you think
that's part of what you build a program around is making sure that every day somebody wins and loses so that every day we're working on adversity and how to handle those things.
Well, no, I get it. But don't you think that the Southern Columbia footballs and the UConn women's basketballs and the North Carolina women's soccers and the Penn State wrestling, don't you think they revel in the scoreboard? and that
I think
you're
the
talking about they're
scoreboard
making losers every day in practice.
revels,
but I think I think they revel in the fact that they're winners because the scoreboard tells everyone they're winners.
Revel's a weird word, because if you're doing it correctly, the scoreboard is a reward for the process, but it does not mean that the process is not working. And so what coaches, like the best coaches, like if you ever read books from like Wooten and like Morgan Wooten, but that's not
I knew
he
who
didn't
you
write.
meant.
I don't know if Morgan Wooten wrote a book. But if you're reading like Wooten and all these things, like the scoreboard is a reward, but it's not to be reveled in. The scoreboard is a reward for the fact that you have gone through the process and that it worked out for you that night. What most people revere John Wooden as one of the greatest coaches of all time. I don't necessarily agree with everything Wooden said.
I agree. I'm not a huge Wooden fan.
One of the things that Wooden was really big on is it was all about you. You worried about your team, your process, and if someone beat you, they were just better than you. Like you didn't go scout other teams. Now Wooden could do that because he had the best players.
He had the best players.
Agreed. However,
it's easy to be a great coach if you have the best players.
Yes. However, the one thing that I've always said about Wooden is you can disagree with the triangle. You can disagree with his philosophies. The point, though, is that they had them and you bought into them, and nothing was bigger than that. And even though they were talented, it's not like there weren't other talented teams across the country that could have beaten them. And a lot of their success was you didn't have to agree with the process, but it was right there in black and white. And if you bought into it, we were more likely to be successful. And if you didn't, we were more likely to fail. And so what I'm saying is the idea that Southern Columbia doesn't have that is absurd. It's absurd. There is an expectation and a belief in Southern Columbia. And obviously the scoreboard matters very much.
What do you think the expectation and belief is?
In Southern Columbia?
Yes. And I will answer my own question. I think the expectation and belief is, I would assume,
without
being there, I would assume the expectation and belief is to win a state championship.
Let's start here.
That's what I assume.
That's fine. And you would probably be in with the majority of people who are asked that question. I would say to people, before you answer that question, does anybody work as hard as Southern Columbia football?
I'm sure they do.
You do. You think like maybe a Jersey Shore? Like who do you think works as hard as Southern Columbia?
Well, like off the top of my head, I don't know.
Because there's a fault. Because here's the other false pretense.
But let me say
here's the other false pretense about Southern Columbia is that they're just more talented, and that because they have these kids, if they just do what everyone else does, they'll be successful. And I am here to tell you, they do more than what most football teams in our area do.
Well, and this is a whole different topic. The rest of the coal region would say where they do more is recruiting.
Yes, because that's an easy out.
But there's also,
you don't think Southern Columbia, so just to clarify, you don't think Southern Columbia is in the top 95 percentile for how much they work out, the top 95 percentile for how much they execute, the top 95 percentile for what the amount of time and effort and money that is put into their student athletes. You don't think so?
No, I don't think they just win because they work harder.
That's not what I asked you. I asked you if you thought that they're in the 95 percentile
really
for all of those things.
Absolutely.
Do you think they're in the top 95 percentile for all of those things?
Absolutely.
So what I would say to you is, I think winning the state title is the goal, with the understanding that all of these responsibilities come along with it. You want to win state title and get all of these things, you better show up on time to lift. You better come to the workouts. You better put your time and effort in so that can be our goal. And I think that is the part that people vastly underrate about a program like Southern Columbia.
Well, but I don't think
you can only have those goals if people understand the underlying necessities that come along with those goals.
And I get that, but I don't think that Southern Columbia has walked onto the football field very often in the last 5 years, and we're the more talented team.
But we're going to disagree. Again, we're going to disagree on this because I think people thought the same thing of Loyal Sock basketball. I think people think Loyal Sock basketball is just more talented than everybody else. And the thing that I would say to people is they don't see us putting up 500 shots at 6:30 in the morning.
But
they don't see us traveling to AAU stuff. They don't see us getting our asses kicked in Harrisburg. Like they don't see any of those things. We just must be overwhelmingly more talented.
They also don't show up and say, this kid went to Mount Carmel until 7th grade. This kid's from Lewisburg.
Listen,
this kid's from Shimo.
We got a kid from Williamsport. We try to make sure kids don't go to Newman. Like we certainly have our own style of that, without a doubt.
But yes.
We have our own version of that.
There is now you're getting into a whole different topic. But no, I don't
want to. I'm just telling you.
I don't believe that Southern Columbia is a 5-time state champion just because they work harder than everyone house. I don't believe that at all.
I don't think I said that. You asked me if I think the goal for Southern Columbia is to win a state title. And what I was trying to demonstrate to you is with no doubt that that's the goal. But I think what they're incredibly good at is they probably make sure that people understand, in order for this to be the goal, here is all the things and the responsibilities that must come. And so for the last 6 years at Loyal Sock, when I would talk to the kids, I would say, listen, like, our goal is to max out. And I think maxing out with the group that we have is a state title. However, in order to do that, we got to go play spring AAU. We've got to make sure we put up 10,000 shots a kid 1 October. That was the goal. 10,000 shots a kid.
Now you're talking about things internally in the program. I'm talking about the community as a whole. I'm talking about in general with any situation when the homecoming queen gets dumped for the first time in her life, and you're like, she's going to have 1,000 dates. It's the first time in her life she's ever had to deal with this. And if Southern Columbia loses on Friday night,
it's the first time they've had to deal with it.
It's the first time we think they haven't lost 2 games in a season since 2011. When was the last time they were 3-2 with games coming up that they might lose?
It's not the first time they dealt with a loss. It's not they will be absolutely fine.
But again, who's they?
I think people.
It's the first time these kids would have had 2 losses.
This is what I would say. I respect that you really care. I do, because I love high school sports, and I think high school sports are unbelievably important, and I'm fascinated by them in these conversations. I think what is being demonstrated now, and I will reiterate what I said before, I think people are sick of Southern Columbia winning. I think watching them lose is fascinating for a lot of people, and they're so sick of watching Southern Columbia win that it has to be deeper than just them losing. There must be more to it. It must be, oh my gosh, like they've never been 3-2. Imagine what they must be panicking. They must be. And all I'm saying is, as someone who has been in a pseudo situation where success is high, I'm telling you that their feelings on it are not the same as yours and everybody else's. It's not. It's not.
In the locker room.
They are handling it differently than what other programs do.
And again, maybe because you're but it's not. This isn't. You make it sound like it's hatred.
I have yet to say you have been for an hour and 6 minutes. I have yet to tell you that you are speculating, and yet I have been closer to the situation.
I'm speculating. I'm speculating.
I have been closer to the situation than you.
But you're not as close as you think.
Your way of basically disclaiming my point is to point out that I myself am speculating.
Loyal Sock basketball is the best basketball program in the area, but your level of success is not.
You're not saying anything I haven't already said.
Not on a national level.
I already said that.
And it's not. This isn't about hatred. Everyone roots for the big dog to lose, unless you're a fan of the big dog. But
this is different. You just said this is different.
No, but what I'm saying is,
were people happy when Southern Columbia lost?
What I'm yes,
were people happy?
But that's not the point. The point is,
because there's a difference between being surprised and being happy.
The point
is, people were happy.
The point is, and I'm not arguing that. That's not the point. The point is, it is fascinating when anyone who has had nothing but success has to deal with a level of failure that they haven't had to deal with essentially ever. And that is,
you're overrating it.
Maybe I am.
You are acting,
but I think you're underrating it. So we'll agree to disagree, and it'll be interesting to see what happens.
You're acting as if people who I can't even think of a good analogy. You're acting as if people have no pretense for handling loss because they haven't done it in that exact scenario. And again, people handle this stuff in different aspects of their life all the time.
Correct.
A kid fails a test. A kid gets dumped. A kid loses a drill in practice. They play a different sport and get crushed. Who knows?
The
idea that these kids have no idea to handle
are
loss.
Different. Their expectations are different.
No one expects to get
dumped. There's state champion track kids who fail tests. There's state champion wrestlers who fail tests.
No one expects to get dumped.
No.
Okay.
But this a state champion wrestler that got a 68 on his history test, he doesn't care. And I shouldn't say that, he might care. But it's not what your expectation is in history class and what your expectation is on the mat is different. So he's on the baseball team that wouldn't.
I love that highly successful people are one-track minded, meaning they can only want to be highly successful in one thing.
No.
Okay,
no,
exactly. So I agree.
It's not what I'm saying.
I agree. So the point that I'm making to you, though, is like, you're acting as if when they fail a test, they didn't care about the test. When they got dumped by their girlfriend, they didn't care about the girlfriend. When something
No.
goes
I didn't
wrong,
say that. I said that they could be devastated when they get dumped by their girlfriend.
So there's a level of expectation to other things in their life that they are disappointed when they don't reach those expectations. The idea that they're not going to be able to apply that to football is absurd. It's absurd. It's crazy.
So you think everyone just deals with loss well?
That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that I think.
So then how do you know how well they're going to deal with it?
Because what I'm saying to you is you're acting as if they have no experience.
They have very, very little.
What I am saying to you, you are saying that they are not going to handle this well because they have no experience.
Mm-hmm.
And what I'm saying, that's what you said. That's what you said. That's what you said. And now you're going to change it because it just clicked. Now, no, see, it just clicked for you.
There has to be a point where you
just caught on. You knew what you did, and it clicked, and now you're going to try to backtrack.
I'm fascinated to see how, well, as a team, see, and you keep going to the locker room. I'm talking about the community.
Gotcha.
And yes, if back at the community,
which is funny because you kept asking me the questions.
I don't think
I took us there. I think you asked questions.
I don't think the community is going to handle it well if they're 3-2.
I think they're fine. I think they're fine.
And that's where we disagree.
Right.
And it'll be fascinating.
They have adults have bills to pay. They have jobs. They have real lives.
Go sit in the crowd at one of these sporting events.
I do. But again, that is them. It's a one in the moment expression. When they wake up the next day and Penn State's playing a football game and they're watching the Penn State football game, now they're mad at James Franklin instead. There's no way. They're just consistently going to be mad at some 17-year-old who didn't catch a football. They're not going to be
consistently mad.
Okay, but they're going to move on to the next thing.
When Penn State fans lose, they're mad at James Franklin. It affects their mood. It affects their mood.
How do you want to wrap this up? Because I will let you have the last word like you always do. So go ahead and have the last word, and then I will end the show.
You just think fans are way more rational. I'll give you an example of just the irrationalness.
You've given enough examples.
Montoursville a couple years ago. Montoursville a couple years ago went 2-8. We were also and the people who kind of knew.
Montoursville football isn't.
Well, hold on. But that's not the point. It's not the point.
Well, when I tried to use,
are you going to shut up and let me talk? You can talk over.
Listen, I gave you an hour and 11 minutes to say what you needed to say. If you can't get it out by now, I don't know what to tell you.
I think you just asked me if I had a closing thought, and then you talked all over it. So, I sat down with my brother around the pool in the summer and looked at the schedule, and I said, knowing what we have and knowing what we could start 0-7, and that was the route. We go out and play one scrimmage because we have football, and we scrimmage someone who wasn't very good, and we did well in the scrimmage. And I remember talking to the head coach, and I said, and after the scrimmage, I talked to an assistant coach, and I said, what do you think? Assistant coach goes, maybe 6-4. We did really well this weekend.
Sure.
And I was like, 6-4? My brother and I went through. We think we're going to start 0-7. I talked to the head coach. I said, hey, I hear the scrimmage went well. He goes, well, yeah, the scrimmage went well, but I think everybody on our schedule is better than the team that we scrimmaged.
Sure.
So we start out 0-7. We end up 2-8. One of the parents. So I have 2 points. Number one of the assistant coaches thought 6-4. So as far as everyone has the ability to see this stuff, even a guy in the locker room had no idea how bad this team was. Why, I don't know. But there was a parent who preseason was texting about how great the coaches were and how great this was and how great this were. And halfway through one of the games was complaining to me in the bleachers about what the coaches are doing wrong and what the coaches are doing wrong. And I said to this mom, I thought your post was up. And she goes, well, that was before. They're calling lousy plays. And because fans are so emotional and irrational and wrapped up. You think that the Southern Columbia fans just say, oh, we're not that good. Danville's good. Lewis is good. I think if there's any community that has been taught that all we're supposed to do is show up and win, it would be them. And it would be a fascinating place to be. And maybe I'm wrong, but I think the whole psychology of it is fascinating. And we'll see what happens if they lose to Danville or if they lose to Mount Carmel, or maybe they just go on and win every game and they win the state title. I don't know.
I think the idea that what Roth and his staff does is now going to be challenged, because there's a difference between complaining and challenged. I think the idea that what Roth and his staff have done and how they've been successful, and now all of a sudden, people are just going to abandon. Like all of a sudden, if you thought he was a good coach, you no longer think he is, because I don't believe it. I just don't. If they won one state title, sure. They won two. Like the consistency and how much they have won, there has to be a leash to what Roth and his
There
staff
should
and what
be,
people think.
but you sit in the crowd and listen to parents.
But you sit in that crowd.
You sit in any crowd. You sit in their crowd.
But their
and
crowd
listen to
isn't
parents.
any crowd, which is, I think, the whole point of this conversation.
When
it's funny how they're different when you need them to be different, but then when you need it to be the same, you sit in any crowd. But you and I agree, they're not any crowd. You and I agree, they're not any team or any program. Like that's the whole reason we're having this conversation.
So you think? I mean, you think they know more X's and O's than the other crowds? Do you think they're better? Do you think Alabama's football fans know X's and O's better, or do you think they just watch their team win?
That's different though, because college kids. How many of those college kids even? I mean, half of their crowds don't even know.
But it's not about that. I mean, do you think
I agree, it's not about that.
Do you think
brought
Southern's
it up.
fans know X's and O's more than other people's fans?
I expressed to you earlier, but I think before the show I said this to you. I think that if you are a Southern Columbia football fan who has gone consistently, like not just the 4 years your kid played, like you went before your kid played and you've gone after. I think that if you are watching, you have seen football at a high enough level to know that what you are seeing now is not the equivalent. I think that's fair to say. Like when you watch Julian Fleming catch footballs for 4 years, and then all of a sudden you're now watching this group. If you have the inability to recognize that there is no Julian Fleming on the football, I think it's a huge discredit to the football fans of Southern Columbia.
How many fans do you know at Loyal Sox in the however decade plus you were there? Mm-hmm. How many fans are essentially just there for the 4 years that their kids play?
Just there?
Most.
We don't get good fan turnout.
Most. They'll sprinkle.
You're saying most come more than 4 years?
No.
You're saying they come
less.
They
only care when their kids are there. They sprinkle back. But the parents, if Southern Columbia is down 3 points to Danville on Friday night, and it's 4th and 2, and they run a play and it doesn't work, the crowd's not going to say, well, Roth called the right play. My kid just didn't execute it. If they threw it and it was incomplete, the fans are going to say they should have run it. If they ran it and they didn't get it, the fans are going to say they should have thrown it. They're going to complain. They complain about Bill Belichick. They complain about Joe Torre. They complain about all the great coaches. They complain about Nick Saban. If things go wrong on Friday night in the middle of the game, they're not going to say, oh, they're going to say we shouldn't have punted there. We should have gone for it. We should have done this. The coach should get a pass. And from most of the community who gets it, they will get a pass because they realize that Roth didn't just forget how to coach football overnight. But from the people whose kids are on the field, when it comes to we lost, I can either blame my kid or I can blame the coach. Most of them are blaming the coach.
Okay.
That's what I believe.
Okay.
All right, I'm done.
Anything else?
I've really enjoyed this. I know you haven't. I think
it's not so much that I didn't enjoy it. I think like sometimes I'm trying to think how to say this. I think I love talking to you. I think sometimes you're
not
really,
on Thursdays.
No, I do. I love talking to you. I think you're really good at like having a two-sided conversation and going back and forth and all these things. I think this is one of the few times where I think you're letting the influence of how people feel about Southern Columbia football determine what you want to be true. And so as someone on the other side of the argument, it's a very hard argument to make because I'm not going to sit here and tell you I don't think you're dumb. I don't think you're an idiot. And I don't even think you're wrong. I think you're influenced. And so how do I convince you that you're influenced or you're letting the outside dictate the inside of Southern Columbia football?
But you think that I find this fascinating because I'm a high school football fan and everyone roots against Southern Columbia because they're so good. And that's not why I find it
I don't think that's what you find fascinating. I think that's what's making you feel the way you feel.
If the same thing, if Penn State wrestling started out 0-4 in the Big Ten next year, I would be fascinated.
Yes. Again,
I don't even care about college wrestling.
I don't think that's what I'm saying. I think I'm saying it's fascinating for a lot of reasons. I thought a lot of the things we brought up were very interesting about high school sports and fans and parents and how communities think about their high school sports teams. I think what I am saying is I think you are influenced the way that you feel about Southern Columbia, because again, not many people like Southern Columbia. And I'm not putting you on blast. I don't know what your true feelings about Southern Columbia football are. However, when you say like they must feel it, there must be a flinch because the whole crowd is, I think people who know very little about what it's like to be in Southern Columbia's shoes feel a way about Southern Columbia because people are sick of them winning. And so how
I don't disagree with that,
okay,
but that has nothing
so
to do with my.
It does, because
it
does, because when you say things to me, it's always going to come with the inflection that I feel that you are influenced by what people think.
The only interesting point, the only interesting topics now about Southern Columbia is when they lose. The only interesting points about UConn women's basketball is when they lose.
But when
they win 100 games in a row, no one cares anymore.
But the funny thing is, like, to Southern Columbia, I think it's a blip. I don't even think they're that interested. Like, you don't think they're interested when their football team loses? I don't think the staff or the players, like, I think they know they lose and they're upset, obviously. But like, they were talking about Lewisburg the next morning. I think highly successful people don't dwell on the things that other people have dwelled on. So for other people still talking about Southern Columbia and they could lose in the NFL, I doubt that they have talked about that for the last 2 weeks.
I disagree that they talked about it the next morning, because I knew they knew they were going to crush Lewisburg, and they were figuring out what went wrong against Loyalsock.
Yes, to get ready for Lewisburg.
Yes, but they knew in their 3-week bubble they had Loyalsock, they had Danville, they had Lewisburg.
I'll also say this.
I just think it's
yes, because we're being open and transparent. I will also say this. I agree that you think it's fascinating. You're a little too giddy about it. And that is part of the reason why, like, you're not only fascinated, there's a giddiness to, like, boy, Southern lost. And you can hear it in people's voices. Like, it is like,
well, everyone's giddy when Southern.
Okay.
And right. I don't care about Southern one way or the other, because they're not in our district. But like, as someone who spent so much time in high school sports and around high school sports, and someone coaches high school sports, the psychology of the atmosphere in the community are, like, I tell you, my last year as an assistant coach, I was in the post office the day of our first game, and an old timer came in and said, how's the team going to do this year? Like, in these small towns, and when Toursville boys basketball had been terrible for years, and we were getting better, but we weren't good. We were nowhere near like a champion. So in the community, like, these things matter. And I can't imagine. Well, I can imagine. I'm trying to imagine. I can't relate to what it feels like to be in a Southern Columbia football community, but
you don't want the opinion of somebody who is closer to it than you.
But you're not that close. You can't relate to this.
Really, I can't relate to this.
You can't relate to what it's like to win 5 straight state titles.
And I cannot relate to what it's like to win 5 state titles.
They've won 6. I mean, they show up and they win the state title.
No, you're fine.
They're the odds-on favorite to win. And this is the thing, on a national level, this many teams can relate to it. What they've done, it's almost so boring here because we can't appreciate the perspective of it.
Yes. Oh, now we can't. We just spent an hour and 22 minutes talking about the perspective of it, and your closing thing is that we can't understand.
Well, it's become so commonplace. I think when you get numb to it, I think it's like Penn State wrestling. Oh, they win national championships every year, and people are like, how does it, like, it's just so much harder than it's so rare of what they did, and so that's why I think, if Loyalsock basketball loses in districts, you guys survive because you lose in districts. They don't lose 6 out of the last 7 state titles, 5 in a row. They don't lose anywhere. And they're going to be 3-2, losing to Danville and Loyalsock. And I'm not saying they're going to lose to Danville, but it's just, and that I think the whole thing is fascinating from what happens in this little small town after it. Like you see in Remember the Titans, and like you see in Radio, and like you see in Hoosiers, even though it's a little drama. Like, I can't believe Southern Columbia football isn't a huge thing in Catawissa. And I think it's a fascinating topic.
Nice.
There we go. That's all I got.
That's it? That's all you got?
Yes, and I think they're going to win.
Oh, do you?
I do.
So we just did all of that, and you don't even think it's going to happen.
Well, I think it's a coin flip, but
doesn't that?
I think going into it, I think there's enormous pressure on Danville too, coming off of the Loyal Sock.
Doesn't that kind of prove my point though? Like we just did. I shouldn't say you because we did it. We just did an hour and a half on Southern Columbia football and the possibility of them being 3-2, and yet like you think they're going to win, and you don't think that'll happen. It goes back to my point of like, I think people really want this to happen. And so I just have a hard
doubt.
Yes. And so I have a hard time listening to people. And again, like I really have no say about Southern Columbia football. I could care less about what happens to Southern Columbia football. I get defensive when I think that people get excited about kids losing, kids not meeting expectations. And there's a giddiness around Southern Columbia losing right now. And I have heard everyone's argument that they recruit, they do this, they do that. And I get it. I have no dispute or argument against anybody that wants to say what happens at Southern Columbia football is not fair. It's a completely different argument, and I will hear anybody out on it because I think it's a fair argument. However, I will never, in a system like the PIAA, that's not a fair system to begin with, I will never root for the demise or the downfall of a 17-year-old kid. And when people talk about Southern Columbia football, you can hear it. Even when they're not talking about it, you can hear it in their voice.
And
they are giddy to watch them fail. And so there's a difference between finding something fascinating and being excited about it.
And I get your perspective on that because everyone here has the same feeling of Loyal Sock.
Mm-hmm.
That when you run into somebody who's not from Loyal Sock, they want Loyal Sock basketball.
Mm-hmm.
They want Loyal Sock basketball to lose
Mm-hmm.
because when one group has been uberly successful,
yes,
they're sick of seeing those people be successful.
And
I get that.
But there's a difference between being fascinated by them losing, like, oh my gosh, can you believe Sock lost? Or, oh my gosh, can you believe Sock lost? And that is what's happening right now with Southern Columbia football. People are giddy at the failures of 17-year-old kids.
Well,
and that is, I will never be on board with that.
This is what I would say. And I'm not, like in my world, I'm sure the people from Mount Carmel are giddy. I'm sure the people from Shamokin are giddy. I'm sure they root every week really, really hard. I wake up Saturday morning, I don't even know if Southern won.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know who Southern played. The only reason I know now is I looked because after they lost, when they were playing Loyal Sock, the only reason I knew they were playing Loyal Sock is because you told me.
Mm-hmm.
So like, and maybe we're a little isolated, not isolated, but we're not in the coal region, so we don't care.
Mm-hmm.
But yes, there is a giddiness. And I know locally there is a giddiness because I've ran into those people who are like, I can't wait till Loyal Sock gets their ass kicked in basketball.
Sure.
And so I do get where you can relate from that aspect. I get that.
25 minutes ago, you said
you can't relate on what it's like to walk in the first day and say, we're going to win a state title. And it's ours to win.
It's so weird you say that though, because like that, like, I don't know how to explain it to you. I mean, don't get me wrong. Early on, there were years where yes, like the goal was clearly not to win a state title. I cannot express to you the last 6 years, like the goal was to win a state title. We weren't as successful as Southern Columbia nationally at the state level. I'm not saying Loyal Sock basketball is Southern Columbia football, but the idea that my insight that a loss at Loyal Sock basketball would not open up the doors or give insight to how Southern Columbia football might feel after a regular season loss, I very much disagree.
I understand that Michigan and Penn State and all these teams and LSU and all these teams show up every football season to win a national championship. And that is their goal. But it's different if you're Clemson, if you're Alabama, if you're Ohio State. It's just different. And I know Penn State's trying to win every game and they're trying to win, but it's their expectation. One has a real expectation and one has kind of like a hope.
I get it. But when Bama loses a regular season game, like Alabama does not fall apart.
You don't think the mood in Alabama on Sunday is different?
It's not about the mood though. Like it's the difference between like being disappointed or like people in the town actually getting like, I don't think anyone's saying Nick Saban shouldn't be the head coach of Alabama. Like, I don't think anybody's...
No, and they're not going to say that, but I can't believe that
because
the mood here is different when Penn State loses.
Yes, because the fans of Alabama understand that losing a regular season game does not mean you still can't win the SEC or win the national title. And the goal at Alabama is to win the national title. In Southern Columbia, I find it hard to believe that if you lose a regular season game, that the majority of people in Southern Columbia don't understand that the goal is to win a district title or a state title, and that losing 1 or 2 regular season games does not stop you from doing that.
And I agree with that wholeheartedly.
So when you say to me, how do I think people in Southern Columbia will react? I'm letting everyone out there know who's super giddy about them losing. I'm letting them know, I get why you're giddy, but I'm telling you, don't enjoy it as much as you are, because I promise you it's not as bad as you think it is.
I know what it's like here when Penn State loses. I know what it's like here when the Steelers lose. I know, like, walk out of Buffalo Wild Wings when the Steelers lose, and it is like a funeral. Except for the people, for the people who hate the Steelers.
So just so we can end the show, you disagree what I just said, is what you're saying. The last argument that I just made, you disagree with.
You keep putting into the giddiness of other teams losing.
I think people think the way that Southern Columbia is going to react, right? They think it's going to be worse than what it actually is going to be, because they need it to be. They've been so good for so long, and I just can't stand Southern Columbia football. So when they did lose this game, and if they do lose another one, it's gonna be awful in Southern Columbia. Like, they're just gonna be so miserable, and they're not gonna know what to do, and it's gonna be great. And all I'm saying is if you remove yourself from the equation, of hating or disliking Southern Columbia football because they win so much, and you just look at them as a team that has a process and is successful, it's not going to be as bad as you think it is. It's not. Highly successful programs and teams know how to do this.
And you
don't think they know how to lose?
You're very confident in that, and I think the mood and the bounce back of handling adversity is different for everyone. But that's what makes it's a chicken and egg thing. That's what makes programs great. Good programs, I don't know how to say this. Like, one of the dumbest quotes I was ever told, but I kind of agree with it. Like, losers lose and winners win. And I know that's a very simple thing, but there's so much truth to it. And here's why. Because once you are winning, it doesn't mean you'll never lose, but it means that you have a process and a program in place that allows you to exceed more so than you won't. And so in a weird way, winners do know how to handle losing because they have things in place to handle it. Yes, we've been here for an hour and a half, by the way. No one's listening anymore, right?
I love your telling me that. I've told you that like 4 times.
Well, there's so many aspects because one of the biggest processes of winners win and losers losing, and you know this from Loyalsock basketball. How many games last year of your 22 regular season games did you walk on the floor and not have the most talent?
Can I cut you off, or is there something you need to say? Like, are you going somewhere with that? Because I think you're taking the quote too literal.
Like, a lot of winners win is because we're better than the other team.
But see, you're taking the quote too literal, because that's why I said the quote in general is dumb. Like, if you take the quote at face value, yes, winners teams win because they're better than the other team. Yes. When you actually think about the concept of winners win and losers lose, what you're really talking about is the reason why are these teams successful? Because we're not talking about a pickup game and one team beat the other because they were better, right? Why are these teams consistently successful despite the fact that players change and conferences change and opponents change, all this stuff, but yet they still continue year out and year out to be successful?
Agreed with.
I think the reason is I think it is a result of the process. The process basically says that when you do hit a speed bump, when something doesn't go your way, fall back onto these things and it will prop you up. I think that's what Southern Columbia is going to do right now, whether they lose 1 game or 4 games. They are going to trust in their process, in their program, the tradition, the legacy, all their hard work, the stability of the staff. All of these things are going to be the reason they handle losing, when people like you think, because they have no experience of losing on the scoreboard, how are they possibly going to deal with it?
I don't know which analogy to lose. I've just been around too many successful sports teams, and when they lose a lot, the mood's different.
Mm-hmm.
I know, Penn State is whatever level of success. They're not Ohio State. They're not. But when Penn State loses, like, the mood is affected.
When the
Steelers lose, the mood is affected.
Pittsburgh's fine. When Penn State loses, there is an idea in NCAA football that every game matters, right? So if you're Penn State, to lose one game and you're going to play Ohio State eventually, it's like the season's over. I mean, that's basically what you're saying. I can't express enough. In high school sports, very rarely do you lose a regular season game as a top-tier program and your season's over. I mean, if you're Southern Columbia, and I'm not saying they do this, like, I don't know.
Correct.
But let's say they have like a list of goals, like finite goals instead of infinite goals. And their finite goals are very simple. State championship, district title, conference title, right? Undefeated. As a coach, you walk over and you cross out the undefeated and you look at your kids and you're like, listen, do you guys see all of this? Everything at the top of our board.
The coaches won't handle it.
Okay, but that again.
I'm not talking about the coaches.
But we've gotten to a place now after an hour and a half where we're talking about the scope of it. Because I'm not going to convince you about the community. You believe the community is going to react that way based off of how you have seen other communities act, and I don't really have a good argument for that. I don't. My only argument is I think they've seen some stuff that other places haven't, so I would imagine they're going to be able to gauge and judge some stuff that maybe others wouldn't. Maybe I'm wrong, maybe I'm right. I would say to you, though, as a core, how the coaches and the players handle this will then flood out to how the rest of the community handles it. Because those kids are going to go and people are going to ask them, how was practice? How are you guys holding up? Like, what are you guys thinking about for Lewisburg? What are you guys thinking? So, like, their mentality is going to flood out. And what I'm saying is I think Southern Columbia is a good enough tradition and program. There's no way negativity is spewing out of that program after what they've accomplished. Do you think if there's what I think. If there's a negativity, like if there's a positivity negativity meter in that locker room,
mm-hmm.
You think that it's spewing out negativity right now?
No. But
okay.
I think if they lose on Friday night when their fans are leaving the bleachers, I think it's spewing negativity.
In that moment?
Mm-hmm.
Yes. When does it not spew? When does it stop? Because I think for
after
people,
they beat Mount Carmel.
Okay, because I think
they beat Mount Carmel.
And I think that is the view of the majority of people outside of Southern Columbia. I think for Southern Columbia on Friday, everyone's like, "Oh, it was just Lewisburg." I think for people in Southern Columbia, it's like, no, like it was a win. Like a win's a win. In Southern Columbia, and you know what Southern Columbia is good at? You know what Southern Columbia is good at? Celebrating winning.
Winning. I know. And you know what? They have very little experience of dealing with loss, and that's what I think. That's why I think it's fascinating.
Thank you guys for staying with us.
Nobody stayed with us.
Thank you for watching the Midday Show. Be sure to go to NorthcentralPa.com for all of your local news. The soul has been sucked out of me. I have nothing left to give to society. Not that I was giving a lot to begin with. At some point I would love to talk about 5 days at Memorial. Maybe we'll talk about it in 2023. I don't know. At this point, you could have watched the show. We were joking that you wouldn't have enough time to watch the show. At this point, you actually could have finished most of the show. I thought
about watching a little bit last night.
If I would have just put it behind me right here on a TV,
still be on?
You probably could have finished it in the time of this show right now.
I still think after a minute, an hour and a half, you missed my whole point. That's what I think.
But here's the funny thing. You asked me the questions. You did most of the questions that show. The meat of that show, the middle of that show was you asking me questions.
No, I know, and we should wrap it up. But you just I think you talked more about the locker room and the coaches, and I talked about the community. Yeah, and that's the difference.
Not your fault. In my defense, we've talked about the community for an hour, and so I thought maybe we should talk about something else. So I will take the blame for that one.
That's fair
for sure. Casey Cuzio said something about beating a dead horse, and then. Tastes like good. I've had you guys on mute for the last 15 minutes while I took a call, and I can still hear the passion on the screen. So there you go. So no, it's a fascinating. I agree with you. I think the thing that you said the most that I agree with is that it is in fact fascinating. I just hope that people are finding it fascinating for the right reason, because I don't think they are. I don't think it's fascinating because people actually are interested in the dynamics of coaching or high school sports or the psychology of kids. I think people find it fascinating because they hate Southern Columbia. That's my opinion.
Well, I get that. And I think one of the things is that it's just so hard that that anything that becomes regular in our world, we forget. Like, we didn't appreciate how good Tiger Woods was when he was winning because we're just like, well, he just wins. And the greatness is when it becomes commonplace, people forget how special it is. And that's why this program is so special, because it's great on a national level. So anyway, I just think it's, and I will. Yeah, I think the whole Coal Region football is fascinating. The stories of when they used to put coal dust on the lines or on the snow so they could play on Thanksgiving Day, and the whole Shamokin, Mount Carmel, Southern Columbia, whole like the holy trinity of Coal Region football down there is fascinating. And obviously, I'm not part of it. I don't get it. Knowing it from afar, it's still fascinating to me. Yeah. So I can only imagine what it's like on the inside. Yeah. So that's that. I'm good. I had fun. I was interested.
I'm Jeff.
I didn't mean to piss you off.
I don't think you pissed me off. I think it just got to a point where I didn't know how to insult you. Like, I didn't know how to insult you anymore without like ruining the conversation.
I don't know why you had to insult me.
Because I think you were giddy. I think you are. You'll never say this out loud, and in your conscience, I believe you when you say like you aren't excited about Southern Columbia football losing, but when you talk about it, the way your tone and your expression, you are excited. Now you describe it as fascination, which I don't disagree with, but again, I think subconsciously, I think people have a hard time not being giddy about it.
I remember when Colin Cowherd said this on ESPN radio, it's like, I'm after the story. Because they said that to Colin Cowherd, like, you root for this team, you root for this team. And he said, I root for the best story. When it comes to Southern Columbia football, right now losing is a better story. It's just like Berwick
is the more popular story.
It is a better story when they lose, because they always win. So it's a no-brainer when they,
I agree.
Like when Ohio State loses, it's a good story. When Ohio State wins, they always win. Sure. So that's what happens when it comes with greatness. Yeah. But it is in this world, like I am fascinated to see, even if they lose to Danville, I'm still fascinated to see how they play against against Mount Carmel, because as we talk about with lots of teams, sometimes you don't want them coming off a loss. You'd rather have them with the squeak out a win than squeak out a loss. Sure. If you're playing them the next. So that's a whole psychology that goes into sports as well. So maybe Mount Carmel wants them to beat Danville because they don't want them to be, I don't know. Who knows?
Right. Well, I mean, like Lewisburg was not thrilled that
Lewisburg was not thrilled.
Yes.
They were certainly not thrilled.
Yes.
Because you woke up a giant.
Right. It will, yes, which will also make the Danville one even more, which makes that game, to me, the interesting part is that. Like, I guess I don't view it as, I'm trying to think how to say this as quickly as possible. I don't view it as Southern Columbia being like, oh man, what do we do now? To me, you have woken up a program and a tradition that is, like you said, a sleeping giant.
Carrie just texted and said, you guys can keep talking after you sign off.
No. I mean, why? Well, it'd be the same.
Well, I'll tell you, and this is one of the more fascinating conversations would be to talk to the coaches and to be like, what did you think coming into the season? Because they may be like, we knew, we were this. Maybe somebody got hurt in the off season. Like, because there's sometimes that, to get from coaches that have been around long enough, like they have, like they had an idea coming into the season too, that they were like, if we make it to the state final, this is going to be, because they may be dealing with the same stuff. Like, they're like, everyone expects us to win every time.
No, I get it. I can't believe Carrie doesn't want us to keep giving free content. Tell Carrie, text Carrie back, said, Jeff, this is free content.
If this was high school soccer, she'd be all over it.
Oh, that's a good point. We did discriminate soccer a little bit today.
We did an hour and a half on high school.
We could have said something. Lewisburg soccer, really, really good.
Loaded.
Montoursville girls soccer for a little bit.
Montoursville girls are good. I think we said Southern Columbia girls won the state title.
Southern Columbia girls just won it. And then there was someone else won. Midwest boys.
Is it Central Columbia girls loaded
in soccer?
Yeah,
I know they're
Midwest.
I know they're really good at softball.
Midwest is always loaded
at soccer.
Yes.
Okay. So no, I'm trying to. I mean,
I think a couple years ago, Midwest had a girl that went to Penn State to play soccer.
I don't doubt that for a second. Wasn't Lewisburg track and field?
They're always good.
Really, really good
Forever
for a stretch.
and ever and ever.
Okay. I was just going through and trying to think of like different pockets of programs that obviously Waynesboro basketball for years, obviously.
I think their cross country.
Okay.
I think they have great distance runners. I think their cross country and their track is good, but it's carried by the distance runners. That's what I think of Lewisburg.
Yeah.
So anyway, there we covered the whole sports spectrum.
Is that what we did?
That's exactly what
all
we
right.
did.
Thank you to Carrie Pauling for putting up with us. Thank you for all of our employees in the office.
By the way, we should throw this out. Fleming's healthy again. He scored 2 touchdowns last week.
He had a great weekend.
He's just been – there are a few people that have been stuck with the injury bug more than he has.
Mm-hmm.
And
no, he had a really
last
good
week,
weekend.
my son kept texting me, hey, he scored again.
Yeah.
So it seems like he's finally good to go.
Yeah.
Which is just in time for Penn State fans. I'm sure they rejoice in that.
There's a lot of, I mean, I told you, Daniker didn't end up playing in the Penn State game. I don't know if it was an injury
didn't he
or
play?
what it was. No, he didn't play. But he's the lineman at Ohio. Connor Watkins is still starting at Villanova.
The
Potts,
Garcia kid had a huge game.
He did. And then the Potts kid, I believe, also from
Minnesota,
was able to play. So, like, right now, I mean, it's really, really neat how many guys are actually getting, like, Division I opportunities from our area.
And Penn State is – I think Ohio State is here.
Okay.
Because I think Michigan is there.
Yeah.
So hopefully Fleming can stay healthy for 3 more weeks.
Someone brought up Hempfield. Hempfield boys volleyball, state champs, 2001 and 2007.
I did not know that.
Hempfield, baby.
Where's
you know who's really good at boys volleyball?
Where's Hempfield?
Hempfield? Isn't that down like past Lancaster?
Oh, I don't know.
I think it's like somewhere around like Lancaster, York, like between the two.
All right, we have no one listening anymore. We should stop.
Do you know who else was really, really good at sports?
Who?
What was I going to say before you interrupted me with? I love how you get to decide that we need to get off, even though I brought 10 times. Okay. Who was I going to? Now I can't remember. It doesn't matter. It's wrong. Thank you guys for watching.
You were going to say about volleyball, I thought.
Oh, you know who in our coverage area? State College, boys volleyball.
High school?
So if you look at their like rafters, if you're in their gymnasium, in our coverage area, State College boys volleyball is like a legitimate thing. I don't know who all is like in their district.
Well, I know Penn State does better at volleyball than for their region. Like volleyball is a West Coast sport because everyone grows up playing on the beach. I think Nebraska was good at women's volleyball for a while, but Penn State does better at volleyball than they should. Yeah. When you think of where they are geographically.
Yeah. Girls volleyball in this area is going to be interesting because Williamsport has it now. I think they're on like year 4 or 5. Loyal Sock, I believe, is on year 2.
I know Central Mountain has it.
South
Williamsport had it. Did they keep it?
I don't know. But it's going to, I mean, eventually it'll be something that everybody has. That's my opinion because it's cheap. They already have the gym. Like, it's too easy to add a volleyball team to not have a volleyball team. That'll be interesting because the dynamics for years and years and years, if you won a district volleyball title, it was essentially either a glorified NTL title or Lords. So it was like all the northern tier. And then it was
Wellsboro's had
Lords.
volleyball forever, haven't they?
Oh,
or does everybody up there?
All the northern tier teams.
Okay.
It's bigger up there. So when you would, you'd go into these brackets and stuff, and essentially if you didn't have to play Lords, you were pretty much playing an NTL bracket. So as these teams, Route 80, down Route 15, it'll be interesting as these teams add volleyball to see like how it all plays out and balances out. It's been dominated by kind of one area of the district, and now it's going to take years. I don't think people understand, like, if you don't have a program, it's not easy to just start.
No, it's not easy to start.
There's a lot more system and philosophy to volleyball than I think the average watcher gets.
Yeah.
But it'll be interesting in our area how it works out. Can you imagine some of our athletes playing volleyball?
Well, when I first thought about that, I was like, there's not enough girl athletes. But when you get the tall basketball players, that soccer doesn't fit for them unless they're the goalie.
Yes.
So is not necessarily you're not necessarily stealing the soccer players.
What will start to happen though is people will start to look at soccer and volleyball and they'll go, I can go to this practice and I can run 2 miles, or I can go to this practice and be inside out of the rain and barely run at all.
I was going to say
I'm not saying that volleyball isn't difficult. It is difficult. It's a completely the
but you can be
plyometrics,
lazier.
the jumping and the plyometrics. I'm not saying it's easy.
That's why people like baseball. You can be lazier.
Yes. And so it will be interesting. Like if I'm a really good female athlete 5 years from now and I'm in 5th grade.
No, I get it.
Do I want to go stand in the gym where it's warm, or do I want to go run 2 miles in the rain?
Because when I ever see a good girl softball player and I say, do you play soccer? And they say, no. I said, is it because you're too lazy? Because softball and baseball can be very, very lazy.
Yeah, no, it'll be interesting. Here, volleyball 100% steals kids from track. I believe that.
I thought volleyball was in the fall.
It isn't. Well, it depends. Our volleyball is in the fall. I think boys volleyball is in the spring across the state.
Oh.
Because obviously with football
you only have so much gym access. Okay.
But see, girls soccer is that way too. Not all girls soccer is in the fall.
No, you're right.
It's the state split in half. There's two separate state brackets. All right. Thank you guys for watching.
You want to stop already?
Yeah, why not?
I feel like we just got started.
I didn't. You ate before the show. I didn't eat. So
that's a lesson.
We'll put Carrie out of her misery. Be sure to share. If anybody that you know is interested in Southern Columbia football, please share with them because I think it was a good, fair conversation.
I just think it's fascinating. People, because life, it's not just about, people think about, it's dealing with success and dealing with failure because and how do you deal with it? And it's going to be, because they've had very little practice at dealing with loss.
Did that text make you feel like you were like someone getting rushed off stage after they were giving an award?
The music, when the music starts
was that
playing?
What it was like?
No, she sent a couple during Wrap It Up. She sent, you guys can continue not live, you guys are losing your audience. She sent multiple ones, and I responded to some of them.
Wow. Were those direct quotes?
You guys might be losing your audience, new topic. And I responded with, they're already gone.
Well, there's probably some truth. I would argue we lose our audience because people work. That's what I would.
Well, I shoot that too. Because we're so involved in it, there are so many levels of high school sports that have to do with socially and confidence and psychologically and dealing with that it is.
Yeah, she doesn't speak for the whole audience. Let's bring her on. Carrie, come on out.
So anyway, we could talk about the goods, the bads, the highs, the lows of high school sports.
I feel like we just did.
We could even continue.
Could we?
We could.
Could we?
See, you don't know enough lows. I've dealt with way more lows than you have.
I think I've dealt with lows. I mean, I've been on great teams. I've been on bad teams.
I don't think you've been on a lot of bad teams. I don't think you've coached a lot of bad teams.
I was on a college team.
College doesn't count. We're talking high school.
Oh, okay. All right. If you're not going to.
What was your worst high school basketball team?
My freshman year, we were 6 and.
Oh, so you were on a bad team.
6 and 18, because at that time you still played 24 games. So I think we were 6 and 18 my freshman year.
Okay, how good were you at your best?
My senior year, we lost 2 games.
Okay, so I didn't know you were on a team that was 6 and 18. I thought even when I didn't know that.
Yeah, when I was a freshman and we had a new coach, and I mean we were starting. I don't want to say we were starting from scratch, but it was not great.
Okay, yeah. No, I did not expect it.
It was a building process that I was a part of for 4 years.
I was on the first. When did we start high school baseball? Townsville High School baseball had been around almost 20 years, and my junior year was the first losing year we'd ever had.
Okay.
That was a proud moment.
Probably not, but I don't know. Obviously, it's not a proud moment. I just wonder, like, looking back at it now, was it as big of a deal as you thought it was?
No, because high school baseball is not a spectator sport.
Okay.
It's a parent girlfriend sport.
Okay.
You have to go a long way in high school baseball before you get a crowd.
Before people actually start watching it.
And especially because it's after school, people are at work. All the track kids are practicing track. All the tennis kids are playing tennis.
Yeah.
It's nice out for the first time. If you have a nice day, do you really want to go watch your kids, or do you want to go do something of your own? So you got to get a long way before crowds come.
I still think we got football and baseball backwards. I do.
Seasonal?
Yes.
You might be right. You're not the first person that said that.
I really do. I think high school baseball would survive much better end of summer, early fall. And then football, I think, would be better off heading out of the spring. That's just my opinion.
You're not the first person that said that.
Yeah.
It's just tradition. It would be weird not having.
It would, well, and it'd be
It
hard.
would be weird.
Logistically, it would be hard to switch it all across too. I mean, because now track and field's competing with football, and I mean, it would be a hassle without a doubt.
Oh yeah, that would be the worst part. The football team and the track team.
Baseball too. Well, no, because we'd swap them. So you'd have track and field competing.
You'd lose
with
the kids that are the sprinters.
Unless you moved track and field, you just did a full swap. You just did fall to spring and spring to fall.
Yeah. You're right. All right.
All right. Thank you guys for watching. Jeff Everett, Mark Messina. See you tomorrow.
Nobody's
You don't know.
Nobody's here. They're gone.
You don't know.
They're gone. They're all gone. 2 hours. They're gone.